thank you very much for coming. We really appreciate it.
Did you want your head in the picture?
Yeah.
So you know what? Maybe I don't know if you turn your phone.
Maybe I stand it on something.
Your head. You're getting popped.
Okay.
So I don't know if you need to put your phone.
Maybe if I put it on the table, but then I don't want to block anybody's view. You know what I mean?
No. So I think what's.
Tilt it back.
Or do you put it
the other way?
As opposed to landscape?
It's not going to fit in here.
Oh, okay. Gotcha. Yeah, you need to really.
We all trust each other.
I can, if you stand there, if it tilts, I can tilt it.
Okay. Thank you.
So we can get you. Or we've got to zoom out a little bit.
And you're just passing this with it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and did you want the,
Yeah.
okay. So you need to stand a little to the left. Whoops. I think we have you. Whoops.
Okay.
It's a little tilty.
I'll have somebody edit that.
There you go.
At the beginning.
Okay, you're set.
All right, everyone. So thank you very much for coming. This is a presentation that I've wanted to do to let people know about this information because not a lot of people know about it. And I came across it because a friend of mine has studied this for 30 years, practices it for 30 years. And because I've been in this material for about 9 years, I see the difference in myself, and it's all about the different parts of us that make us up and what drives us, like who are the primary people that drive our car, as she says. And I've done some training in this since last year on the voice dialogue, so we're going to be doing, we'll ask for a volunteer later, we're going to introduce that. But that is all about the identifying like one part of you that runs your life. And if it's a part of you that you really don't like, and it's really annoying, but it keeps popping up and popping up and popping up, once we do the voice dialogue to it and identify it, the energy of it shifts. So then when it happens, you know that part of you is coming, and then you have the ability to say, no, I'm going to take it from here. So it's like identifying the parts of us that run our lives and the parts of us that we buried when we were younger because they didn't serve us. And knowing that each of these parts has the same amount of power. So the parts that we buried, do you ever notice if you're not an angry person and you bury that part of it because it didn't serve you growing up, but when it comes with such a force. It comes with the same power with the ones that runs our lives. So I'm just going to give you an example of one of these selves. So they're called primary selves and disowned selves. And the primary self, the example I'm going to give you is so perfect. So I started flying almost 7 years ago. I was working on the ground at JFK for 17 years. Situations happened and I started to fly. But I started to fly a lot because I needed money. So I had this part of me that would not let me rest. You gotta focus, you gotta work. Anytime I took a day off, I would have this inner critic that we're gonna tap into later, come and tell me, you cannot lie on the couch and do nothing. You have to get up, you have to work, you have to get on the computer, you have to get more hours, you have to do this, because it was all about survival. I had to survive. This part of me drained all my energy. Every minute that I had, I was on the computer trying to swap my trips, get extra hours, get better trips. It exhausted me. Totally to the point where when I was off, all I could do was just like lie on the couch and just do nothing. Then this lady, Yolanda, she did the voice dialogue on this person. And this person, their primary role is one of my primary selves. They were running my life, was to protect my vulnerability so that we would have a place to live. We would have food to eat. We'd be able to pay my bills. So these selves come in to protect our vulnerability. And they come in at a very young age. And they develop as we get older because they're such a part of who we are. The parts that don't serve us, like the lazy part did not serve me in this particular situation, and anytime I tried to rest, the mind was kicking in, the inner critic was kicking in, But once I separated and identified that energy, I called it, you give them a name, so I called her Bernadette. and she explained her role in my life. Then anytime she came, I was aware of her energy because she was like driving me. She was the pusher in my life. I was able to say, no, not right now. So it was like it's called aware ego. So you want to come to the place of awareness when one of these selves kick in and say, no, I'm going to run it from here. But once you do that, the energy shifts. It may come again, but at least it's not constantly overtaking your life. Once we know we have these selves, so I've had a lot of work, this voice dialogue done on me. And all of these selves over the years have been separated. I tell you, I'm lighter inside because I'm aware of them when they come. I'm aware of their energy so they don't overtake me and put me in a place where I don't want to go. And it gives me freedom then to say, no, I'm going to handle it for today. Thank you very much. So you have to talk to them because they're actually a self. They're a part of you. It's like you're talking to an outside person, but they're a part of ourselves. And once you talk to them, it shifts. I can't explain it. You just have to see it in your own life, at work. And then you'll see as you start to incorporate it. So it's become a part of my being. So when those voices come, or this one comes, or that one comes, not all the time because it takes a lot of work. But a lot of times when they come, I'm able to say no, especially that inner critic. And we're going to be doing quite a bit on the inner critic, that little voice that comes in and says, we're not smart enough, we don't know enough, you can't do that, nobody's going to show up, they're going to judge you, all of this stuff, and it stops people from really doing what they want to do. The inner critic can actually cripple you with fear. And once we identify the inner critic, so when we did the inner critic, I was telling Marianne, so I did this course with Yolanda, 1 year, right? Every month out to Limbrook for 1 hour. In December, she finally explained the purpose of the inner critic. I said, you waited a whole year to tell us that? But because a lot of people had not done this work on the selves, she wanted people to understand the selves. But ever since I found out, which Marianne is going to be explaining later, ever since I found out why the inner critic is present in our lives, my whole life changed. Because I'm aware now it's not there to destroy me, it's not there to kill me, and it's not there to cripple me. But we don't know that if nobody tells us that. And yet we continue with this inner critic voice. It's a part of who we are. So I'm going to do a presentation right now explaining the people that actually founded this system, Hal and Sidra Stone. When we're done, this is a great book. It's called Embracing Your Inner Critic. I've read it so many times. These are the people that founded this system because in their own relationships it wasn't working and they couldn't understand why their relationships weren't working. But then when they discovered each other's selves, then they're able to actually combine it together so they live a healthier life because they're aware of these selves that take over and what they represent. Okay, so the first one I'm going to talk about is the primary self, and that's the ones that run our life every day. So we'll do a 10-minute on that, and then I'm going to go into the disowned, which is the ones that we buried, and why we buried them, and why they don't serve us, or they didn't serve us, but that we need to incorporate them. So I'm just going to do one more thing. So one of my disowned selves was not having a voice. So I didn't have a voice. I would always just like zip my lip and say nothing. But once I started to incorporate that and bring that part of me out into using my voice, I had some balance in my life. Instead of that part of me not saying anything, getting resentful because I didn't know how to speak to people, I didn't know how to say my truth, I didn't know how to say I was feeling, because it was never good when I did that. So I buried it. But once I brought it out and I started to incorporate it and actually use my voice, it brings a balance. So really, what they're talking about is having a balance in your life. I'm not saying that you need to pull these ones that we buried out and be a part of you, but be aware they're there and they're powerful and you can access them. So it's really incorporating everything. So let me just see this. So, and as we go along, I have some worksheets and stuff. I want it to be so we're all working it and getting the material together, because then it brings more life.
Can I just say one thing?
Sure, of course.
So, you're going to see with Hal and Sidra Strong, this stuff is really inner work.
Yeah.
And it can trigger some emotion. It does trigger emotion, but that's where the healing begins. So we are going to do a voice dialogue with somebody who volunteers. And I just want everybody to know this is a safe space. Nobody's here to judge. And Annie and I are trained to hold that space.
The voice dialogue.
So just want to let everybody know
Thank
that.
you.
If anybody wants to volunteer, if you have a part of you that you don't want, or you want like a little separation from it, so then you can see it at work. Once you see something done, then it makes sense. Okay. All right. So let me just play this. So this,
Good.
so this is our. Thank you very much. This is our primary.
4:00, doesn't it?
No, about 2 hours.
Right?
It could.
Each of us is born into this life quite vulnerable. We're born in, as little vulnerable children. And in this vulnerability and sensitivity, now we don't mean vulnerable as victim or somebody who can easily be attacked or hurt. We mean vulnerability in terms of sensitivity, reactivity. Each of us, when we're born, is quite vulnerable. We have nothing to protect us in the world. We need to develop a personality that's going to be able to protect us from harm, that's going to prevent hurt from happening, and that's going to win us love. That's going to make us feel good, that's going to make a safe place on this planet for us, and that's going to be able to make us happy and efficient also.
What would happen if somebody stayed vulnerable?
We would be too fragile. If we stayed vulnerable, we'd just be too fragile. We do perceive more than with just our usual senses, our eyes and our ears, etc. We do have perceptions that go beyond the 5 senses. And an infant carries these. An infant also carries something we talk about as the psychic fingerprint. And that is whatever it is that makes us unique. We emerge at birth vulnerable, but with this psychic fingerprint. There's something that makes each of us unique, each of us recognizable. It's whatever that something is that a mother recognizes in her child, that lovers often see in each other. It's the something that will thread through all the paintings of El Greco, so you know it's El Greco, and you don't have to sit down and think about it. It's the something where you hear Beethoven and you know it's Beethoven. Whatever that is that gives the signature, a kind of a psychic signature, a fingerprint, we come out with. Now, we get born with this, and we are vulnerable and we are sensitive. And as we grow up, we must form selves. Now, the selves we see as the building blocks of the psyche, as the smallest psychic units. The selves are subpersonalities that, if you want to picture it, grow up to protect us, to be between this vulnerable inner child and the rest of the world. They earn us love. They protect us from hurt and harm, and they protect us from humiliation, and they make it possible for us to get along in the world. If we never developed these selves, we would never go anywhere. We would be total victims. But so the development of personality deals with the development of what we talk of as selves that come and surround this vulnerable child and protect it in the world.
Think for a moment of a young 3-4-month-old child lying in a crib, and the mother is standing over the child, and the child is cooing and gurgling and smiling, and the mother is very, very happy. The something in the child begins to recognize that the mother is very happy when it gurgles and coos, and very unhappy when it cries. So this part that begins to develop in the child recognizes that it feels better in the world if it pleases, essentially. It's really the birth of the self that we call the pleaser. It wants to make the mother happy because if the mother is happy, then the child is happy. So we have the beginning of a self that protects this very, very young infant by getting the love of the mother.
This pleasing self that Hal was talking about, this pleasing self that develops early in life because it makes everyone around it happy. It's we call it a subpersonality or a self, but it's a being. It's very real. So if my primary self is a pleasing self, I see everybody in terms of what they need, what's going to make them happy. I react to them to make them feel better in the world. And that's who I think I am. That makes it my primary self. It's the self literally that runs my life. It's who I am in the world. It's how I live in the world. It's what I see, what I hear, what I notice about in other people.
So it becomes your identity.
Precisely. It becomes my identity.
How many of these primary selves do people have?
Probably hundreds. Then you have just an almost infinite number of ways of being in the world. They're all subpersonalities. You can behave selfishly. You can behave lovingly. You can behave with compassion. You can become a rebellious child. I mean, the number goes on and on and on and on.
So what exactly is a subpersonality?
Well, a subpersonality or a self is a discrete structure within the psyche. We don't have a unified psyche. We have discrete structures within it. And each of these selves or subpersonalities is like a separate person that lives within our psyche and that takes over and will run us for certain periods of time. It has its own perceptions, its own memories, its own physicalness in my body. My pusher is a little bit tighter in the shoulders and a little bit more focused in my eyes. It's a particular part of me that runs my life in one particular way.
Is this what's called a split personality?
Well, a split personality, this is very normal psychologically, by the way. Everybody has selves that take over and that run for certain parts of our lives. A split personality is one where one part takes over and then drops you, and then another part takes over. So, for instance, a split personality would be if I go to a party and I behave somewhat unlike myself. I'm more flirtatious, or I say things I wouldn't in an ordinary day because I'm usually more careful. If I come home from that party and I say, I just wasn't myself last night. I had a marvelous time, but I'm a little bit embarrassed now. It's not a split personality. I know some other part of me came in, took over, and was behaving in a different way that night. A split personality is I go to the party, I behave quite wildly, outrageously, and the next morning I don't know anything about it. Somebody else wakes up. There's no body keeping track of what's happening.
So it's quite normal for people to have a number of subpersonalities.
Absolutely, absolutely. And we see them come out at different times. For instance, you might be somebody who goes to work and you're very strong and you're very centered and you're very sensible and you're very impersonal at work, and you work all week and you're a tiger, and you go have dinner at your mother's house Friday night, and all of a sudden you become a sort of a little boy, or you get a little more awkward, or you don't have the right answers. A different self has come in. The person who ran the business is no longer in charge.
So let's think about some of these selves that begin to develop early in our life. Let's name some of them. What are some of the really significant ones that happen to us? Pleaser. So the pleaser develops. Why does the pleaser develop? Because the family rewards us if we're nice, if we smile, if we do what we're told. If we accommodate to the needs of the family, then we're rewarded. it's really a conditioning process. So the pleaser is a very, very big primary self that develops for most of us fairly early on. Imagine now a child at the age of 2 years, and the father is swinging the child around his head wildly because the father likes to be physical. The child may really hate physicality, but he wants the love of the father, and the father's happy when the child is happy. So the child kills his fear, he kills his dislike of this, and he yells in joy at the swinging around. And so we have the birth or the development of another self in this child that wants to make the father happy, that pleases the father.
So when you say kills, what do you mean by that?
Well, whenever we have one of these primary selves born in us and operating in us, it automatically means that on the other side, there is some part of us that gets rejected, that we can't have. So if the child is afraid, but he essentially rejects his fear, then he identifies with pleasing and taking care of.
So that's one. So I don't know about you guys, but I can identify with that pleaser. Growing up, if I had the floors polished in my house and I had the vacuuming done, the hoovering as we call it in Ireland, then I just became that pleaser because everything was more peaceful in the home. And then it became such a part of my life because that's who I became. And then I became exhausted trying to please everybody. And then you get resentful when you got to please everybody. But it's amazing, like when we don't identify like a pleaser in our lives and see, I mean, just look at your own lives, how that pleaser was exhausting and the planning that had to go in to be the pleaser to make sure there was no disruptions anywhere, you just get lost. It just becomes, it runs your life. So now I'm just going to do one on the other side, and then we have some little exercises just so you can see your own. So when they pop up, then you could say,
You know what I had a question about, Anna?
Yeah,
though?
sure.
Like when he was speaking about like killing the feeling, like how the how if the father was swinging that child and the father was very physical and the child wasn't. I'm still not grasping that. Like, just because the child wants to make the father happy,
right? He doesn't show he's fearful.
Right.
Right. So he doesn't show.
So the child automatically will kill that.
At a young age.
Wow. Yeah.
At a young age, but we don't know that when we're younger.
Yeah.
I mean, I wasn't aware of any of this until I started doing this work, and it took a long time for it to actually absorb. But it makes so much sense why I had these parts of me and why they developed. But nobody ever told me I had them. I just thought that's just the way life was, but it's not. As you become aware then why, it can actually, I mean, it's liberating to know, but it's actually sad at some stage too, the fact that you bury parts of you that really should have developed at a young age. So this is the opposite. Does that answer that, Mary?
Yes.
Okay. So this is the opposite. So this is the parts that we buried. Let me just, there we go.
At the same time. So let's go back now to our pleaser.
Right.
Okay? You develop a very strong pleaser, very, very common in Western culture. And you please people. Now, if you always please people, what happens on the other side? If you have to please people, you have to get rid of something, don't you? What do you get rid of? Your selfishness. You're a non-pleaser.
The disowned self is the self that we bury, that we get rid of, that we repress to keep our primary self in charge. The primary self says this is the way we live life, and everything else has to be put away. So if the primary self is hardworking, we put away the lazy person. If the primary self is very relaxed and doesn't want to bother about trying too hard and says, hey, the idea of life is to live a good quality life. Don't tell me to rush and get up in the morning early. Then you're going to put away the part that wants to get up in the morning. If my primary self is a pleaser, I'm going to put away or get rid of the selfish part or the angry part. If my primary self is responsible, I'm going to get rid of the irresponsible or the selfish. If my primary self is feeling, I'm going to get rid of my mind.
So, for example, if I'm 3 years old or 4 years old, I'm playing with my blocks. I'm building this lovely little castle. My little 2-year-old brother comes in the room and he knocks down my blocks. And I knock him in the head with a block because I'm mad. I didn't say 42, I said 4. I'm a little aggressive. My mother hears the crying of my little brother and she comes upstairs. Thank God my father isn't home. And she really, really lays into me and she yells at me and I have to learn to cooperate with my brother, and this is not, I can't do that and I can't hit him and I can't do anything. And I'm very unhappy because I don't like it. First of all, I'm mad, but I can't be mad because I don't get rewarded for that. And I want my mother to love me. And so I hand my blocks to my little brother and I say, you play with the blocks, it's okay. And after that happens a few times, I develop a pattern of pleasing, okay, because I'm punished for not pleasing. But what am I burying? What am I getting rid of? I'm getting rid of my natural aggression. I'm getting rid of my natural selfishness. I'm getting rid of all that instinctual energy that was there when I hit him on the head with a block, you see. So a split develops at that point, you see, where he becomes cooperative and pleasing. But those underlying feelings of anger and resentment and rebellion and all of that, the puncher, that goes underground. Doesn't disappear, goes underground. And he grows up then with his pleaser and cooperative one driving his automobile. And his selfish one and the puncher is hiding in the back seat someplace. Now, there's nothing wrong. There's nothing pathological about any of this. It's just the way life is in the big city. None of us can avoid it. As parents, you can't avoid it with your children because you can't just let the 4-year-old child hit the other kid on the head. Otherwise, he'll always hit him in the head, and you'll have an abusive situation. We have to step in. But what we have to realize is it has its consequences. So for every primary self that you develop, on the other side, equal and opposite, is a self that is, in fact, the opposite.
The warm and cool is another primary and disowned self set of opposites that's very common and very painful, as a matter of fact. So what you usually see is a woman is warmer, the man is cooler, and in relationship, the wife will be complaining, he's cold, he's not, he doesn't relate to me, I don't know what his feelings are, he's always thinking. And that's her disowned self. In return, her primary self is warm and feeling and intuitive and giving. He would complain the opposite. He would say, she's just too warm and she never sits down and thinks. She never thinks things through. She's never, focused and sensible about anything.
Personal and impersonal are a pair of opposites that Sidra and I struggled with for a very long time. I was just 5,000% the impersonal person, and Sidra was 5,000% the personal person. And that showed in many, many different ways, but especially when we were teaching in the early days. From the personal side, Sidra would look around an audience. If there were 300 people in the room, and if there was one person in the last row that you could barely see, who was covered with a sack over their face, if that person was unhappy, Sidra would feel the unhappiness. And her attention would be drawn to that person.
And I'd worry about that person, and I'd think about that person, and I'd watch how that person was responding to how.
I, from the impersonal side, could handle anything that would come up in the room. It didn't make any difference. If somebody was upset or crying or whatever it happened to be, from the impersonal side, it was handled without very much feeling involvement. People were always saying to me, and I mean always, Hal, you're too impersonal. You're so impersonal. And I would say to them, that's your problem. If you had more impersonal, you wouldn't be bothered by me. That's how we stay locked in our primary selves, you see. No matter how much criticism we get, we don't believe it because we're listening to it and answering it from our primary self. So if the pusher is your primary self, what do you get rid of? What's disowned?
Small beach bum.
The sloth, I like that.
The sloth.
Sloth, yeah.
The beach bum. Those people that live in Byron Bay.
He's got a good example here, so I just need to put it on just so you can see how powerful this is.
Those people that live in Mendocino, California. The only problem is you move to some place like Mendocino or Byron Bay
Or Kauai.
and what happens? You take along your computer with you and you take along your internet, and in 1 year you're worse off than you were in New York.
One other point I'd like to make about the disowned selves is they're not all negative. They're not just the selves that we judge. Usually they're selves that we judge or that we're uncomfortable about. But they can also be selves that we wish we could have, but our sister had them or our brother had them and they became disowned. So it could be something I just wish I could be creative, for instance. If I'm identified with my mind and I know I can do very careful, reasonable research, or I can turn out a sensible kind of paper, I might really envy somebody who knows how to paint or knows how to dance. And that would be a disowned self. And I might have disowned that, early in life because my sister was creative or my brother was creative. Because siblings do divide up the pie.
The people that you judge, the qualities that they have, they represent your disowned selves. This is really, in our view, one of the most important ideas in all psychospiritual work. It's so basic. So what do we mean by that? So would somebody be willing to volunteer somebody in their life that they judge?
Okay. It's a girl who's always needy. I mean, you give her any, she takes a mile, and she'll ring me 11 at night and 6 in the morning, and I won't get off the phone, and she drives me nuts.
God is good. We paid Wendy to tell us this one. Wendy, this is a very needy woman, right?
Very.
Very needy.
Yeah, and very childish with it, too.
And childish also, better yet. And Wendy, what is your primary self?
Pusher, I think.
Pusher?
Yeah.
And independent?
Independent, responsible,
Yeah.
not a wimp, never needs people.
Yeah, responsible very much so.
Very
Right.
responsible.
Okay.
Yeah, she's irresponsible.
Cindy and I are psychic. Very, very, very psychic. Okay, now, in your family system, why did you have to identify with your primary self of independence and responsibility? You were pushing off of somebody or identifying with somebody. So what happened in your family system that required you to go the route you did?
I think I had to stand up against my mother a lot.
Okay.
Huge amount.
Was what was her primary self?
Hysterical, crazy.
Perfect.
Okay, so you really had to get to be responsible, independent, able to chart your own course, and not need her.
Yeah.
Okay, now what is this the woman's name that you mentioned? Make up a name, I don't care. Mildred.
Yeah, Mildred will do.
Mildred. I knew it was Mildred. Now, if you think of the universe as having an intelligence, and if you think that this intelligence in the universe and within our own psyche, if you think that this intelligence wants us to learn, to embrace all the selves, to become fully who we are, then do you understand why this intelligence of the universe sends you Mildred?
Yeah.
Because what this intelligence does is send you in relationship exactly the medicine that you need to complete yourself, to heal your own wound of childhood. Your mother was not a safe mother because she was too emotional, too hysterical. You had to go in the other direction and become strong, independent, solid, right, to make it. But in doing that, you pushed off on your mother, and you then created in you an imbalance, so that you had to get rid of your own neediness. You couldn't afford to have that because there was nobody there to take care of you. It was too painful, you see?
Yeah.
So now Mildred comes along, who's driving you crazy. So what they do in heaven is they have computers, and the computers spin around and they figure out what's the medicine that Wendy needs in order to complete herself. And what turns out Mildred. So Mildred either kills you or you recognize that she's your teacher. The people you judge in your life, they are your teachers.
Whoever it is that you judge, whoever it is that you hate, whoever it is you feel absolutely morally superior to, is your disowned self. So you look at the people in your life that irritate you, and you figure out what it is about them that irritates you, and that's your disowned self.
Can you give us some examples?
One common one that we hear is somebody is on a job, and let's say a young woman is on a job and she has a boss that she can't stand. I mean, we've only heard that 5,846,000 times, you know. And what that woman will say about her boss is she's so authoritarian and she's so unfeeling and she doesn't care personally about anyone in that whole office. And she is so mean, I really can't stand her. So then we'll say, in general, do you have a problem with people who are more authoritarian and mean in that way and cold? And she says, I hate them. But I always seem to bring them into my life because the truth is we always keep attracting our disowned self. And it's a terrible thing because it causes us immense pain. These are very painful human situations, and a lot of the pain in life that people feel are because of these disowned selves, because they keep coming back to us in relationship.
You know, it's funny. It's like you can't get rid of them. You just can't get rid of them.
But you see how powerful it is? But it makes sense. Like once you start to realize it, like when you start to look at your own life, like the parts that run us and the parts that buried, but they're right. We're still attracting the same people until we actually become aware enough to see who it is we're attracting. And then once we start to do some work on ourselves, then we become aware. But how it affects relationships. And they said in here, I just wanted to read this for you, that's why divorce lawyers make so much money. Because people don't understand their own partner. It says, interestingly, many solicitors specializing in divorce say the most common remark people give about the partners when asking for a divorce was, I really never knew they were like that underneath. Because now the self comes out that they never seen. Right? So when you're with somebody at the beginning, everything's nicey, and then all of a sudden later on, these other parts of this person come and you're like, who is this person? This is not the person I know. This is not the person I'm married or dating or whatever. The partner had suddenly started to express himself or herself in a new and different way, and the person didn't realize it wasn't that they were really like that, but they were merely expressing another self. So in relationships, once you can identify in the other person what's triggering you, then you can see, well, that's my disowned self, that's their primary self. But once you start to connect the two of them and realize that it's not just an angry person or it's not an overpowering being, that's a part of us that we don't incorporate in our daily lives. They said there were no more than that self than the original one they were expressing. They did not understand and thought they had married the wrong person. Had they hung on using correct processes, they would have passed and more subpersonalities would have arisen. The joy of relationships is discovering your own and your partner's selves, letting them express themselves as they wish. It is truly enriching and fulfilling in many ways that are stunning and powerful. It's a path of consciousness. So really, instead of being mad at this other person, when you can identify what self they're in, then it just makes things more understanding. So you don't get angry, you don't, retaliate back. That's the natural instinct when somebody's overbearing, you want to react. But then when you can look at them and say, wait a minute, what are they representing in me? So then it actually calms everything down and you save all your energy. And then the relationships don't go crazy because you have an understanding. So once we start to understand our own selves and the parts that come, it becomes very liberating. Very liberating. So I made out some sheets if you'd want to have a little look at them. And it's a little worksheet. So it's discovering our primary selves. So on the left-hand side, you're going to talk about what you like and what you don't like about yourself. On the right-hand side, now you can fill them out now if you want, or you can fill them out, but at least fill them out so at least you become aware. And then on the right-hand side, you're going to write about somebody else. It's, this little square.
Oh, okay. Next one. Okay.
Yeah. So then on the other side, it's going to be the other person. So what do you like? I wish I could be more, blah, blah, blah. The other characteristics that you don't like. So this side is for you, and this side is for the other person. So before you write them in, just read it, think about it. If you want to take 2 or 3 minutes. And then on this other page behind it is a little circle here. And the ones over here are going to go in the circle, and the ones over here are going to go outside the circle. It's just kind of giving you an idea of what your primary selves are. Mm-hmm. So some of them, I put down, persistent, respectful, patient, kind, controlling, motivated, a pusher. Whatever it is that you think you are. And then on the other side, you're going to write down things that you don't like. I don't like the fact that I am often, and then whatever I have some examples written down here. Dishonest, rude, unkind, mean. You ever get in the traffic and you just want to get I'm not, malicious, selfish, unforgiving. It just gives you an idea of who you are. I think I have some more pens. Do you have any pens, Marion?
You know what?
Let me see if I have any more.
I saw some up on the counter right near the.
Oh wait, here's one.
Okay. Oh yeah, there's some up here too.
All right, so this column here, other characters that I like. Oh, not me. So that could be in anyone. Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Okay. And then,
you know what? One of the things that I was thinking is too is.
Yeah.
The little kid being swung around and he was fearful, but he suppressed his fear
Right.
in order to please the father.
Right.
So, I think we all suppress sometimes.
Yeah.
So that you don't hurt another individual's feelings as well, or you're afraid of hurting somebody else.
Yeah.
Like I have a neighbor that comes all the time, more often than probably what anybody could tolerate. But anyway, I sometimes I won't say anything,
right.
so as not to insult that person or have that person feeling bad. So you suppress what you're feeling so as not to hurt another person.
Yeah.
I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah. No, that makes sense.
But is that good or bad, or you shouldn't do that, or you should do that?
Well, really what they're suggesting is to find a balance. So to
Identifying
incorporate, it's there,
I know
Right,
it's
you're
there.
identified
Right.
it. Yeah.
But-
You're willing to accept it.
Right.
Accept it, yes, but just so it doesn't cause you like a resentment because you're not using your voice, that you're angry that you're not using your voice, but you're letting this person come in all the time and you're getting angry, and but you're like, I don't want them here because I have things to do, blah 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 blah.
Yeah.
So it's really like becoming aware that that's the part you've buried, but what they're trying to, the message, what they want to present is, they want you to become aware that this is a part of me that I've buried, but to try to incorporate it. If you can't incorporate, because some of them are so powerful, you know, and some of them are so buried, you may never incorporate them, but being aware that that is a part of you that's buried, and it was buried for a reason. And then gradually, if you can start slowly saying, you know, today's not a good day, or I have things to do, I have to go, can we do it another time? So incorporating it. So like a balance.
Right.
And that's the hard part, is using your voice, like being true to yourself, and that's what I struggled with for a long time. But it relieves a lot of resentment and a lot of anger, because especially when you have things to do and you just don't want this person in your house.
Yeah.
But yet you keep doing it over and over again. So
Yeah.
what's it doing to you? How is that serving you? That's what somebody used to always say to me. How does that serve you? It doesn't.
But I found even in this too, Annie, like there was so much, like I kept hearing it throughout, like it's, so I had the love of my mother, so I had the love of my father. I mean, I kept hearing that throughout, you know, and that's all, you know, they were talking about, you know, I guess toddler age or newborn, or, you know, and that's so underlying in all this.
Yeah.
You know, it's like the love, I don't know if that's where it comes from, the love of the parent initially.
Yeah.
Right? Did everyone else hear that?
Yeah.
I just like,
Yeah.
yeah.
Because we're
You
young.
don't really think about that often.
No.
Yeah,
Because
kids absorb so much more
Yeah.
than you think.
right.
But when you're thinking about it, I mean, I think in a lot of us, you know, like if you have absent parents, you know, in your childhood, boy, you can end up really screwed up.
Right. Until you become aware of yourself.
Yes.
If you choose to
Yes.
become aware,
Yes.
and you're in enough pain where you want to go and get help,
Yeah.
and then things start to clarify a little bit. But if
Yes.
you don't, if you're
Yeah.
stuck in the primary self of being the victim, or the pusher, I have to do this, I need to take care of my family because, you know, I didn't have it,
Right.
blah, blah, blah. It can run your life, but it destroys everybody else's life when you're on this one way and one way only.
Right. Not only your own life, but everyone else
Right.
around you. Yeah.
Plus, when you are in these primary selves, which is the greatest thing, especially the pusher, the protector, you're not accessing your vulnerability. So unless you have some form of vulnerability in your relationships, how can they work? Because you've one person who is, like he said, impersonal all the time. How can you have a relationship with somebody that doesn't show any personal energy? Like relate to somebody. I mean, this is deep stuff. But it's all about healthy relationships. Developing healthy relationships.
Right.
That's what it is. And when these selves kick in, you'll see it after the voice dialogue, but just to be in that place and say, when you recognize it, when it comes, you can say, no, not right now, I'm going to handle it from here. 10 minutes later it may come back, but the more you do it, the less it's going to come, and the quicker you catch it, and then you save yourself so much energy. So you save your energy for what you really want to do, instead of wasting your energy on things you don't want to waste your energy on. It's very powerful.
It is powerful, but as I think of another person, Mary Jo probably figure out who that person is, but some people are just selfish though. And
That's a
all they
primary
ever
self.
do is, but all they think about is themselves.
Right. They're in a primary self.
But some of this is, not that it's, to some degree this is encouraging selfishness, because if you give up the pleaser, right? If you give up the pleaser all the time, and you're only taking care of yourself,
Right.
I don't know that that's a good thing.
Well, it's really, again, about finding a balance. So if you're the pleaser, right, and this person is selfish, right?
Yes.
Right. So you have to look at what is he representing? Like, are you selfish? If you're not, then it's like incorporating that part that sometimes with this gentleman who's coming to your house, you could say, you know what, I need that time for myself. That's not a bad way. That's actually a good, like he said, the disowned selves are not all bad, because now you're taking care of yourself.
Because that person may never identify, you know, what's happening, you know. So like you said, if you
The
can,
selfish person may never identify.
yes,
Yeah, because that's
yes,
the primary step. That's all
yes,
they know.
I really feel like that, especially I think in this situation. I think the person is unable to, so you have to able to identify it in yourself.
Yeah.
And like Annie said, just figure out a way where, you know, the balance is right for you.
Yeah, slowly,
Yeah.
slowly.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
that's not being selfish. That's self-care.
Yeah, totally.
You know, so the thing of this is just really creating awareness that we have these, and how can we utilize them to balance ourselves. Some of them we may never access, but that's okay. It's not saying you have to incorporate them, but just notice them, and then if you can incorporate them, really just to give you more of an even balance, so you don't have the resentment when he's coming and he keeps coming, you know. And you could say, you know what, today I have things to do, or can we do it another day?
Right.
That's all. You don't have to explain yourself. You just have to say, you know, today's not good, we'll leave it for another day, and that's it.
Boundaries.
Boundaries, exactly. Yeah, because you're home, and you know.
But then the Irish part of us
Exactly.
ends up being the guilt. It's not about the Jewish guilt, the Irish guilt.
Yeah.
Everybody.
But
Italian
it's
guilt,
yeah,
you know,
but
you
it's
know.
yeah, but you understand what I'm saying, right? It's like really just incorporating that we have them
Yeah.
and why,
And allowing them
and yeah.
to happen in your life, because if we don't allow them, we're pushing them down.
So he's actually your teacher. He's teaching you to become
Oh.
incorporate selfishness a little bit into your life, because selfishness can be it is self-care, especially in that situation. Yeah, because you're wasting your energy then knowing he's coming. You don't want him constantly. It'd be different if you set up, you know, when it was convenient for you. So think of it that way.
Yeah. One of the discussions I used to have with a friend of mine, because we were so similar, is like being a yes person, right? Always saying yes. And
Yeah.
and the magical line, like, can I get back to you?
Right.
Oh my God, it changed my life, you know? Like, because I always just felt like I had to,
Right. Yeah.
just
Respond.
had to
Yeah.
say yes, couldn't say no,
Right.
because otherwise there's all those other feelings that comes along with saying no. And then it's just like taking that pause and saying, Dan, can I think about it and get back to you?
Yeah.
Just
That's powerful.
it really allowed me to be with myself and really kind of, you know,
Right.
I mean, it was work because you know,
Right.
then I had to really think about what was good for me,
Exactly.
you know,
Yeah. That's the thing.
and why. And if I was saying yes, why was I saying yes? Was it because I really wanted to do it, and I really wanted to be there, or whatever it may be? I mean, sometimes I will just absolutely say yes,
Right.
but knowing like if there's a hesitation and saying yes, it's because something's not right within me, and I'm not really taking the time to honor that.
Sometimes it's really just saying no and just leave it at that. When somebody told me no is a complete sentence, I'd be shaking like a leaf. Felt I had to explain myself. I would get so worked up, and then after I would say it, I'd be thinking, oh my God, they're judging me. What are they going to say about me? Da 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 da. And then I wasted all this energy. But I had to make it a habit. No, thank you. No, thank you. No, thank you. It's boundaries, self-care. Yeah.
I think as women also we're
Right.
almost brought up to be nice.
Yeah.
Compliant. Yeah.
Right, and so we squash that other part that doesn't really want to be nice.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but it's okay not to be nice all the time.
Yeah. You can't be nice all the time
Yeah.
because otherwise you'd be exhausted. Right?
Exactly.
Yeah. It's like, you know, Bob Proctor, he always says there's a flow. You know, we go high, we go low. We can't always be up here. You know, we have to go up and down. You know? But anyway. So, does anyone want to witness the voice dialogue that we do? So we've trained in this. It's a separation of energies. Very, very powerful. Very powerful. If you have it done on you, I can tell you, I must have had at least 15 done on me in different energies over the years. And I tell you, you become free on your shoulders. So free. If you don't want to do it, that's fine. We don't want to put any pressure. We just wanted you to see what it was like, you know, how it actually feels, you know, when it's done, because you'll see such a shift in your own self. Yeah. So.
Voice dialogue.
It's a voice dialogue. It's actually, we're all like energy beings. You know, we're really spiritual beings in a human body, and so the voice dialogue method is, there's a lot of information, there's a lot of theory behind it, but the actual transaction is, the method is energetic. And so you'll connect with the person that say you volunteered, you'd be connecting, and we'd be having an energetic connection throughout the voice dialogue.
Yeah, it's powerful. Powerful, really. Anybody want to try it?
We'll watch you, Mary Jo. You do it.
We don't want to put anybody on the spot. We don't.
I'll do it.
Can I
use the restroom before you do it?
Yeah.
Mary wants to do it.
Sure. Okay.
Go first.
So
I'll
we'll
go
just
second.
Where's the restroom?
Right there.
Oh, right there.
We
So
can do.
we
can do a few people, Mary,
We're
or
only
one
going to
person.
do one, only
Okay.
because of time, because we want to go into the inner
Mary.
critic.
You want me to go?
But we do this anyway, so you can always contact us. But we wanted you to see exactly what it's like and how powerful. Once you see somebody doing it in front of you, you'd be just like, wow.
Yeah.
Wow. I mean, I travel out to this lady, and one time I had this self that I was so angry. I couldn't separate it from her. And I called her. Now I've been seeing this lady for 9 years. Never once has she heard me say I need a voice dialogue. I called her and I said, I need you to do a voice dialogue of me. And I tell you, by the time I walked out of her office, I was like brand new person.
Wow.
That's how powerful, because this part of me was so strong, and it was exhausting me, and I was just angry, but I couldn't get rid of it.
Right.
And once she identified why I had it, and I gave it a name, it shifted. You just can't explain it.
Yeah.
You have to see it in action.
Right. Okay.
And that's why we wanted to make it a part of this, because it's better when it's like hands-on rather than sitting. This I wanted you to see it because it makes sense. But she always does hands-on material, because then it you feel like more a part of it. It makes sense. You're not bored. It's interactive, and you walk away with some tools and some food for thought. Especially the inner critic. You're gonna walk out of here with knowledge, but that inner critic that could save you millions of dollars and so much suffering. I am not even gonna kid you. Coming for that alone would be enough to say, wow, everybody should know this, especially that voice that wants to kill you, destroy you, cripple you, and stops you from doing what you want to do. But we develop it as, so young. So, all right. So, Marianne, you want to stay in your chair?
Sure. So
Okay.
do you want me to? Are you gonna? Who
Mary.
would like to do it?
Mary wants to do it, right?
Mary. Okay. So, Mary, we're gonna have you.
I'll move over here.
I'll do the next one. I'll volunteer the next time we do it.
Yeah, because we're gonna do these workshops.
Yeah.
More.
I think Mary wants to do it. Stone.
So-
How stones into stones.
You know what I'm just thinking too is
Annie's book.
we all have relatives, but like is it and you would feel, and I feel guilty a little bit, there's like a relative that I just don't really like. Do you know what I mean? And I guess because of whatever I see in that relative, that you feel guilty about not liking them.
Yeah, but what's that doing for you?
Yeah, it does nothing for you.
But maybe,
but it's not like you.
But maybe
But
you're
do you want to
seeing,
like that relative
but
now?
maybe you're seeing things in that relative that,
That's right. What do you not like?
right, that you can't demonstrate in your life. Do you know what I'm saying? Maybe you see things in that relative that, wow, maybe I want that as one primary.
You know what? You should do that. That worksheet on that relative, that side.
Oh, that's a good idea.
So even when you're home, get a blank sheet of paper, and use them different times. If there's somebody you don't like, write out. use that worksheet over and over and over again on a blank sheet of paper.
We'll work on it together.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Very shy.
All right. So we're gonna do the voice dialogue. So if we could just ask everybody to be quiet with this. I'm just gonna. Is it okay if I record you guys with this? Just so we could Okay. All right. So okay. So if everybody just be quiet on this, and they're gonna focus. All right.
So let's just take a deep breath and a sigh. And just tell me your name. My name is Mary Ann Jordan.
I'm Mary Brown.
Mary Brown. And tell me, is there anything that might have come to your mind during Annie's presentation this morning that speaks to you?
I think some of what Mary Jo shared about the fact that, I mean, I know this from being a psychology major and all the books, but it's so true that kids pick up on, young people are experiencing things that we would never even know that carries on. And we find that out in therapy, it always goes back to your childhood and your parents. And so just thinking about that and how, we can't take being a parent for granted.
Right. And how about your own child, your own inner child or childhood, anything?
I
just keep the connection with me. So during the voice dialogue, we stay as a way of having an energetic flow. We just keep eye contact.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I think with my childhood, I felt loved and accepted and positive reinforcement and above all loved.
That's great.
Yeah.
It's nice to be loved.
Mm-hmm.
And do you have children?
Yes.
And how do you feel? You made them feel loved?
I believe so. Yeah.
Okay, that's great. That's great. And in your relationships, in your everyday relationships, love is present?
Very much so.
So that's wonderful. So this isn't typical, this, it's, people don't always feel that they were loved as a childhood, in childhood, or they have love so this is wonderful.
And it isn't all, not every day. I mean, it's impossible else we'd be in heaven,
Right.
But, I'm also in recovery for alcohol.
Right.
And right now my children aren't speaking to me, so that's not a happy place. But do I feel that I showed them love? Unconditionally, no doubt about that.
Right. Do you want to speak at all about them not speaking to you? Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's just very difficult. The holidays come and, I text, I write, all the things that I feel is reaching out, and they're just not ready, because I relapsed. And I think they don't really understand the disease and how sometimes that can happen. And I can't expect them also to understand it because they, right now, are not, alcoholics. So they couldn't possibly understand that they could educate themselves a little bit more. That I think upsets me a little bit there. Because they're both, learners and stuff. So even if they did the concrete stuff, learning about the disease, that would help them.
Right. What would you want them to know about the disease?
I think first of all that it is a disease. That once an alcoholic, you may become sober and live a sober life peacefully, but you're born and you die an alcoholic. You just don't do it, man. Just don't drink anymore. That's a concept that they sort of have.
Right.
And I'm sure the fact that I got very sick frightened them, due to the alcohol.
Right. So they're afraid that you'll get sick.
Yeah, I believe so. I believe that's a big part of it. And they can't take watching that.
Right.
Although I'm doing great, you know.
Right.
I feel wonderful, and you know, I feel the program much differently than I did the first time I went out.
Right.
And you know, I want them to see me like this now, you know.
So
But most importantly, what's giving me peace is that I know what I have to do, and I know that I'm doing it, and I'm feeling a different sort of peace than I've ever felt.
That's beautiful. So I'm just connecting with you a little more.
Mm-hmm.
So was there a time that you didn't feel the peace?
Yeah. My marriage was failing, and there was a lot of discord.
Okay. Just so what we do is we move your chair over slightly, just maybe a little bit more,
Okay.
and just tell me about that self that was not at peace, and if you want to give that self a name.
Okay. We'll call it Harriet.
Harriet. Okay, Harriet. Tell me about that point in your life that wasn't so peaceful.
Yeah, it was there was so much discord, and I guess like we talk about childhood and stuff. Like in my house, I was an only child, and I had nobody to argue with. We didn't argue, you know, or I had no siblings to argue with. So I carried that with me, you know, and I
You
just
carried
think
what with you?
the fact that discord would be upsetting to me because we didn't have it, you know, and there was stuff going on. My father's also in recovery for many years, but I think it wasn't very strong. Like I don't remember feeling like devastated or anything like that. We talked about things, you know. My father wasn't a big talker, but my mom was. You know, she shared a lot, and she got you to share your feelings, and I never felt afraid about that, you know. And even as I got older with my dad, you know, if I was upset, he was upset, you know.
So that discord, as you say, do you think it served, your childhood discord served a purpose as you in your adult life now?
Discord, you mean in the marriage, or?
No, you just said we were going to a place where it was less peaceful, and you had mentioned about your childhood. Do you think that it served a purpose for you in your adult life now?
Well, the discord really wasn't in my family growing up. It came in my marriage.
Okay.
And so that I wasn't used to being in discord because my family didn't.
Right.
Okay. But, of course, discord, you know, positive way of thinking is the way I try to choose to go when I'm able.
Right.
And, you know, when you have stuff that is negative and you let it overcome your world, of course it's not going to serve you because you're not walking in peace.
Right. Right. So, you're in a peaceful place now, and
Very much so.
so it's not a normal voice dialogue. Not that it's not normal. I shouldn't put a label on that. So it's we try to get different selves that served us when we were a child.
Okay.
Like say you have like an
I think I know.
a childhood that was maybe that your father wasn't so nice or something like that. And as an adult, you kind of carry that with you. And then we try to see what benefits you get as an adult from the childhood.
From the childhood,
Right.
whether it's good or bad.
Right.
Okay. Well, for me, definitely being, I'm a good friend. If you have me as a friend, I'm gonna be there. I've done that since I was little. Friend with me, I'm there. You know, it's, and it has served me because I feel good about that part. I feel, you know, not so much like the constant giver, but like if you are in need as my friend, I'm there. And I'm dependable, and all those things that people have told me that respect me at this point in my life. I've said, you know, you're a great friend, you listen, you're a good listener. I was a good listener as a kid. So,
and that makes you feel good.
Yeah.
Do you think that's one of your primary selves?
Yes, oh definitely.
Yeah. And you feel good about that you're a giver and you're there for your friends.
Yes, very much so. Very important to me. And I think too, my spirituality, even from when I was young too, I'd be in 4th or 5th grade, I'd be going to, you know, in my case, I would be going to morning mass and just reflecting, like I was real young when I did that, and now it's so much a part of why I survived things, why I'm able to be at peace. And my parents were, you know, in terms of showing me an example, they both were. My mother was an overgiver. She'd do anything for anybody. My father, if he needed somebody to take you to treatments, you know, stuff, he would do that. Only thing with my dad is I carried with me, which is the thing, I don't know if it's bad or good, but I know that I didn't want to be like that, is to be unreliable, like, in that, not something big, but like coming home for dinner and stuff, he would stay out, you know, the after hours drinkers, and my mom would make a meal, and then it'd be sitting there, and then she'd start remaking it until she got intelligent and emotionally sounder. That to me was like horrible. My mother worked, you know, sometimes also a social worker. She did 2 jobs a lot of times. And then she would come home and cook, and then try to like, if he was late, she'd try to redo it, and I'd be like, what are you doing? Why are you doing that? That's, you know, at that point he missed dinner, let him fix his own stuff, you know. But
so it sounds like you have balance in your life.
Very much so.
So mainly when we do a voice dialogue session, it's about creating the balance. And you're unique in a way that you have a lot of balance, love, friendship, everything. So I think we'll leave it at this, because there's nothing apparent for us to really try to see if something served you more than another, or why things happened. So this is actually very nice. It's an example of somebody having balance and using all the good things from your childhood in your life right now. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That was good.
Thank you.
Very your balance.
Not walking him then.
But really, sorry, did you want to ask a question?
Well, what
for
advice would you be able to share
Sorry.
that she would be able to reconnect better with her children? Like she said, she'd like to reach out to them, but they're not really reaching back. I think it's great you're sending them letters and text messages and all this other kind of stuff, but what is it that...
Well, I think only she's gonna know.
Yeah.
It's like an inside job, and I think if when somebody's not ready, they're not ready. And as time goes on, you know, experiences in their life will bring certain things up, and they'll be more ready. And I think you being in program, you know that more than anybody.
Right.
So,
Because you see, I hate this, like this, we call it dysfunctional families where people like separate themselves from one another, and then they just, like Uncle Joe died, and like his siblings never spoke to him again before he died. Do you know what I mean? Like that kind of stuff. It happens all the time.
Yeah, it's sad.
Yeah, it's adaptability and change. I have 12-step in our family. My husband, compulsive gambler now, 28 years in. But, for me, it was a huge journey because I felt like early days I was an enabler, and I was always like the goody two-shoes going back to the family. I was the middle of 5, and my parents wrecked my older 2 siblings, and I was just like, all right. So the organizing one. But, when you do have, like when my husband first went into the program, and I was angry and everything else, and I felt I was an enabler at one point and never saying no. And I knew what I married. He was doing that since he was in college. And then when he finally got in, I had lots of anger. But then as he started to change as part of the program, then it reversed. The roles reversed. Yeah. He was getting angry at me because I wasn't changing. So it's like when your children, haven't seen all the benefits that the 12-step program has on you and your family. Like my daughter, the day that my husband, joined GA, she was 3 years old. And I just remember it was Super Bowl Sunday, and my husband, I just felt my son was 3 months old, my daughter was 3. He stopped when I was pregnant, and I just felt he was back in it again. And I just cryptically said that afternoon, so did you make any phone calls today? I thought he was gambling again. And he said no, and my daughter said, yes, you did, Daddy. And he said, yeah, I did make a phone. I did gamble. And then I also called his best friend to say, I need some help. He said, I will help you if you join GA. And that was kind of the beginning. Now my husband's very, very, that it's part of our lives. He is very involved in, the program in the city, has been doing it all these years, and is helping a lot of people. And our phone rings 50 times a day, and he's helping people. But, there was that period where, I did go to therapy for a bit, and I felt my whole therapy session, my therapist was just intrigued with my life. Yeah, I lived in the city, raised a kid in the city, and sent him to private schools. He became Mr. Mom. and he was just like, it wasn't helping me at all, but it made me realize, yes, I needed to change a bit. I still have my aggravations and stuff, but at the same time, we took the journey together. But, it was also tough being, my kids being raised by this controlling parent, right? And, they're fine today, but that's a journey unto itself. But if it took them as they're adults, they're now 28 and 31, especially my son, when he first graduated from college, left the house, there were a couple years of a lot of anxiety. He went to therapy, and I think he probably crapped on his dad as well. And it's like when they can be mature enough to recognize, because if they have angst, and are they, pardon my French, but crapping on you a bit too, or just not engaging?
Just not engaging.
Yeah. And but they're not giving you the opportunity to let them know the new you,
Right. Well, the one good thing is that I do have friends who will like my best friend, she's the godparent to my son. She'll go out to breakfast with him, and she just listens. She doesn't get involved. She just she's able to tell me, where he's at, how's he look, does he look healthy, is he, seem happy, at least I know some of those things. And she, without sounding obvious, she'll say, well, your mom looks great, she's doing a good job.
So we're just going to move on.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm
No,
taking over
that's
the
okay.
dialogue.
That's fine.
But the purpose of this voice dialogue is really if you have a self that runs your life that you don't want it to, we would talk to that part, and then you would see the shift in the energy. You had a lot of balance in there, but anyway, so we didn't get to see like the full effect of what it is, but it's very powerful to watch it and to see a shift in somebody. When you see a self that shifts from you. So
Yeah,
yeah,
it is
it's very
powerful.
powerful.
Annie and I have done it on each other. And
Yeah,
it's
and I've
very-
had it done with Yolanda
Yeah.
maybe 15, 16 times over the years, maybe more actually. And then a lot with Marianne, but you become freer on your shoulders. The energy shifts. So now this is the main part that I'm very excited about, is the inner critic, that little voice that comes. And Marianne is something that she wrote on it, and Helen Sidra will give you 5 minutes on them just to see like the impact and really what is the purpose of the inner critic. It's not there to destroy us. But once we have that awareness, when it comes, then again we can have that aware ego process and say no, not right now. So the aware ego, my inner critic was kicking into me yesterday, what are you doing, da 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 da, and I was able to say no, I'm not, thank you for your feedback, but I'm gonna do this, and I'm prepared and confident. And so it's not letting it overtake you, catching it when it comes. And the more we practice it and realize why it's there, then it's life-saving. All right, Marianne, it's all yours.
Okay. So one of the selves, as you know, is the inner critic, and I'm just going to talk about where it comes from and why. So the inner critic is that inner voice that criticizes us. We all have that. And it's really a distorted voice. And some of us may not even be aware of it because we've had these constant judgmental thoughts since childhood, and it's almost become natural. The inner critic developed early in life when we first start to integrate rules, whether it's our own rules of ourselves that we should look this way and we should act this way, or it's parental rules when our parents tell us that maybe we should be this way or we should not be this way. So our own, just like Annie talked about the psychic fingerprint, so we have our own individual inner critics. They all may wear a different costume, but they all have the ability to cripple us and keep us in an unhappy place. The inner critic's job is to really, like I said, it's to enforce rules. It's that part in us that wants to stick with the rules, because if we don't stick with the rules, we're going to get in trouble and we're going to have pain. And so the inner critic isn't something that we can really get rid of, like all of a sudden we've done all this work and we just get rid of it. And we can't really please it, because maybe the more that we try to get rid of it or please it, it could get stronger. That inner critic could get stronger. So what we do is we become conscious. We go underneath, we go inside, and we find out, what are our rules? What are our judgments against ourselves? And then the voice starts to quiet a little bit. So we can learn, once we learn how we operate. And so we no longer play the inner critic game. One of the principles of working with and enabling us to handle the inner critic, it's called the conversion principle. The conversion principle is the ability to convert to the distress that we feel when the inner critic is attacking, to really understand that the underlying cause is anxiety and fear. And that's what motivates the inner critic. So we go within, we become aware. And I just want to say that, those people in our life that appear the most powerful or in control, I would say most of them have, at their core, they're intensely vulnerable themselves, and they're very critical of themselves. So much so that they feel like they need to live in this box of control, and they really step outside of it because they're so fearful. So the attack that we're talking about of the inner critic is really a cry for help. It's letting us know that at some level that we feel really anxious and concerned about how we're feeling. The inner critic fears that we will experience pain, rejection, and abandonment, and it's trying to protect us from that. So it gets to the point where it's terrible of us looking foolish or being ashamed that we're not doing the right thing. It will destroy us to avoid us having pain. So again, the inner critic's role is primarily to protect us, to protect that young, vulnerable, sensitive child that we used to be and that still lives inside us and always will. The inner critic is associated with our inner child. It sits on top, and it keeps us in control. Like we got to do this the right way and do that the right way, and we have to almost be like perfect, or else the inner critic will annihilate us. So instead of letting that inner child, that real authentic part of ourselves, come out and say, I feel vulnerable and frightened, the inner critic jumps up right away and pushes away the vulnerability and just says, oh, you're just weak. So to apply the conversion principle that I spoke about, it's when we go underneath. They speak about it in the method that you go underneath. It's going within. It's being aware of yourself. And we get to the vulnerability, which is really the heart of the inner critic. Then we hear that inner critic's voice asking for help. We find it's almost like an alarm system that we're now paying attention to. Just like a child likes to be paid attention to, we are now paying attention to it. And part of paying attention to it is caring for it. I'm speaking it as a person because it is another self. So we're caring for that inner critic, we're caring for that inner child that wants that attention, wants to be cared for. So the conversion principle also involves doing the work of learning our own rules, our own vulnerability by going within, and separating ourselves from our primary selves. And we spoke about those primary selves this morning. And we separate ourselves from the primary self to a more aware ego. Ego awareness and consciousness, that's the goal. So awareness is the key to working with and caring for the inner critic. It constricts our ability to create, to be creative. Mm-hmm. It stops us from taking risk because we fear failure. Mm-hmm. It undermines our courage to change. It is constantly warning us not to look foolish. It's terrified of being shamed and therefore monitors and edits all our behavior to avoid this. And in many cases, it causes us to suffer from low self-esteem and makes us susceptible, often victim, to the judgment of other people. So I have a little worksheet here, and so it's a questionnaire, and at the end you put a number, and number 1 is for rarely, above average is 3, and frequently is 5. And at the end you can tell it's your own for your own self-knowledge and realize where you stand with.
So we're handing out these sheets and stuff, like we just want, I feel like when you're writing them out and you're filling them out, you know, when you're looking at yourself, then it becomes, okay, this is not just in my head, I wrote this, this is me. But so the last one I did on that, I used to have a very strong inner critic, and my God, it would destabilize me altogether. And the last one I did on that, the number was a lot better. But it's amazing when you become aware of it. But I love the fact, like it took me a whole year, as I said, for this person to tell me that the inner critic is not there to destroy me. It's there to protect my vulnerability. But nobody ever told me that. And a lot of people don't know that. So they live with the inner critic, never thinking maybe there's something to this inner critic. No, they just accept everything this inner critic says and beat themselves up more and more and more, and they listen and listen and listen. More fear, and they don't live a life that they're meant to live. You know, and I almost kissed her when she told me that. I said, you made me drive out here for a whole year just to hear that. You couldn't have told us that. But we had to understand the selves. We had to understand the vulnerability. We had to understand. She wanted us to understand or get an understanding of the selves. So she incorporated it all. You know, plus we had a lot of discussions on the inner critic. People would share how it affects their lives and stuff. But that's why it took a whole year, because every month we would spend time and listen to each other's examples. And then as they became more aware when it came, how they were noticing the little changes in themselves. So very powerful, very powerful. So the next time you have a little dose of the inner critic, just say, okay, I hear you.
You know what I was thinking of is that there's a scene in Pretty Woman where I'm very bad with actresses and actors' names. Julie Roberts, and she's with Richard Gere. There's a scene where she's telling him, something like, you hear enough negative things that they become easier to believe. Like he was, I guess, asking her like why she was so down on herself, basically. And you know, like you hear this, it becomes easier to believe.
That's so true.
Do you remember that part of the movie
Yes,
vaguely?
I do.
Yeah, I wish I was.
Are we doing this now?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, or you can do it later.
Yeah,
you know,
whatever you want.
Oh.
It's for your own information.
This is very
I'm
similar.
just going to do one thing, Annie.
Yeah, go ahead.
So on the, when we go underneath and we allow ourselves to do the conversion principle and we get to the point of ego awareness, even just a small bit, then this is traits of the critic transformed. Kind of like what Andy was just describing. Your number gets lower. So I'll just give you a few traits. So now that inner critic, now that you've worked with them, befriended the inner critic, it acts like a positive parent who supports you, makes your risk-taking safe, and allows you to be creative and flowing. It helps you to set appropriate boundaries, and it's no longer interested in other people's criticism. You don't take it in the way you may have before you worked on yourself. It enables you to bring to the ability to focus clearly, and it can direct you in self-improvement as growth or as an adventure rather than as a chore, because nothing is wrong with you.
Did you want to say something?
Well, I was going to say this is very similar to, I may have mentioned it to you once before, Annie, a book that I have called Listening to Your Inner Voice. And are you familiar with it at all? No. So it's the same thing. I'm almost like in that, it's like, oh, I got invited, there's a job opening that I'd like to apply for. And then that inner voice says, who do you think you are, like, to deserve that job? So then you go a little deeper, like, well, so you answer the inner voice, and then you go a little deeper. Well, I don't really have the education. Well, what education do you have? Like, it challenges that inner voice. Well, what is your education? Why do you think you don't have it and somebody else does? Or, you know, so on and so forth. Well, I'm not that confident. So anyway, it's kind of like a back and forth with your inner voice, which sounds like this. Like, oh, I'm worried about what they might think if I go and I'm embarrassed. Or I didn't measure up, and all these like negative voices that come up that protect you from being vulnerable in a situation and prevent you from going forward and doing things. And there's just so many layers, and you keep going down.
There is.
Keep going down. And you get to the root of. It's about being afraid, being vulnerable, being exposed, being like, what if I'm rejected? But all those things.
Amazing.
It's very powerful. That once we understand the inner critic, I tell you.
Yeah.
It can change your life, really, in so many ways. Change your energy. You don't waste all your energy on other people and what.
So, is a lot of the inner critic based on like the whole inner child? I mean, I kind of read a lot of books on that years ago. is some of it based on like kind of inner child stuff?
It's inner child. It's protecting the inner
Right,
child. Actually.
right,
We
right.
develop a lot of this inner critic at a very young age.
Right.
And it's a shame because we grow up with it, and people don't apply for those jobs or don't do what they want to do because they listen to it.
They're paralyzed.
Yeah.
They're
They're
paralyzed by the
paralyzed.
fear,
But
you know,
but
and
maybe
the
they've been
rejection.
criticized as well.
Right.
Like if you're,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
I hate to say you
Yeah.
parent, blame everything on
No,
your mother.
but
You know what I mean?
you know?
But like, no, if you're, somebody is telling you, I don't think you can do, I don't think you can do, I don't think you can do, you hear that often enough, you begin to tell yourself, I don't think I can do.
Right, absolutely.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
And who do I think I am to even, you know, have
Right.
to do it?
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's millions of other people who would apply for that job and be well qualified. Not me.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
All right. So I'm just gonna do a 5-minute on what they have to say about it. Okay. And that should just primary selves. Okay. I think it's about 5 minutes they have.
Inner critic.
There we go.
Okay, let's think for a moment how the inner critic develops. You have a strong pleaser as a primary self. The inner critic then is born right after that pleaser. What's the job of the inner critic? To criticize you if you're not nice. Okay? So this inner critic is always criticizing us whenever we do something that goes against our rules. The rules we've learned in our family system. Is that clear? How that works? If I have a rule that I have to work very hard, then my critic is going to criticize me when I'm lazy. If I have a rule that I have to get all A's in school because my family requires that, if I get a B, God help me, because my critic is going to criticize me very badly as well as the rest of my family. My critic will also criticize me so that maybe I can do things perfectly and then I won't get criticized by my parents. So the critic often gets strong in us because we have strong outside judges. And the critic wants to beat them to the punch.
Basically, if the critic gets to you first, nobody else can get to you because he'll clean you up.
Since the inner critic is responsible for the success of the psychotherapy profession, we're very pleased. You grow up in a family system in which parents themselves are vulnerable and they really want to do what's best for you. They want to mold you in the image of their primary selves. Whenever you don't conform to their picture, that is the primary self picture of the way you should be, there is judgment and criticism of you. Sometimes the judgment is very direct. The trouble with you is that, and sometimes it's implied, it's just a look, which can be devastating. In addition to the personal family, you have the extended family of people that also have value systems, which are just basically primary selves. And these value systems also are judging you and criticizing you for what you're doing and feeling and so forth and so on. You then have the religious structure. You have the national structure of the country that you come from. So all of those are contributing to judgment. What happens from a fairly early age is that the critic is born, interestingly enough, to protect you and to carry out the rules of the primary self. For example, you're born and you learn very early you have to please people in your family or else they're not going to be happy. And that's very clear. They can be mean or they can be not nice, but they're not happy. So the pleaser becomes your primary self. Immediately then what happens is the critic also comes into operation and criticizes you whenever you're not pleasing somebody. That way it protects you because that's what it's trying to do. Because if you don't please, you get punished. And all of these primary selves are trying very, very hard to not have you feel pain. They'll do anything to not let you feel ashamed or pained. That's their job. So the critic is like the enforcer of each of the primary selves. If you do badly in school, your parents are not happy. So you develop a pusher to do well in school. The moment the pusher is there, you have a critic that comes along and says, you have to push. And whenever you relax too much or don't push, the critic is going to be on you and make you feel very bad because you're not pushing appropriately. Anybody here have a pusher? How many pushers do we have here? Active pushers. That's all?
So that was really what I wanted to show you on that.
Oh my God.
But,
You're the ones here making
you know,
A pusher can be a good thing, though. You know what I mean?
yeah,
Like,
pusher
I'm
gets
just
you where you want to go.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, if you don't push yourself,
Right.
you know what I mean? You're not
Right.
gonna become
Right.
a nurse. You're not gonna become a,
Right.
I don't know, neurosurgeon. You
Right.
just, you know, like if you don't.
No, yeah, he's right. I mean, we all need a pusher to get anywhere or
But
do
where's the
anything.
balance?
But
Yeah.
you need a balance. If you live on the life of a pusher, you're exhausted. You're forgetting your own
Yeah.
self. So it's really just.
But a little bit when he was saying something about if you don't get a good grade, your parents aren't gonna be happy.
Right.
But if you don't
Yeah,
get a
critic.
good grade, you know what I mean? Then you don't pass history. You're taking history all over again. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it's there's a certain amount of push I think that you
yeah,
obviously
yeah.
have to have
Yeah.
because things aren't just gonna, you know, you're not gonna be a neurosurgeon just because you say, oh, that's what I'd like to do today.
No, we all need a pusher. Go ahead.
It's when it becomes
Yeah.
disproportionate
Yeah.
to all your other cells. That's where the problem comes in.
Yeah.
Right here. And,
You know, and
everything's here.
not every person is going to ace every class.
Right.
Very
No,
simply.
but if you don't study for the test, it's your own fault that you failed. Do you know what I mean? But
Yes.
so
and
that's where
okay.
that pusher.
That's
and
okay.
that's-
I can remember. I failed one test in my entire life. One. I needed eyeglasses.
No, but like.
I kid you not.
To just choose. What would you say? Not that that's what's the matter with society today, but to you know, like if too many people don't occasionally push themselves, we're going to be in trouble. We can't all take.
I
you
grew
know?
up in that house where A's weren't good enough. Bring home a year-end average in 100. And my mother's comment was, well, that was what you were supposed to do. You know? And she hadn't been home in 2 months because she was in high school. But, you know, that's my year-end average, and that was what I was supposed to do. Do you know what I said to her last time you see it? I was 10 years old. And that was the last time she saw it. I wasn't going to